And joining me now to share some practical advice on how you can do this, reduce your natural gas consumption, is someone who may be familiar to many listeners. Shel Busey is a home improvement consultant, and he joins me on the line. Hello.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Very well. Nice to speak with you.
Well, it's nice to talk to you as well, and nice to be back on the radio and having a chat with the listeners.
Well, I'm sure they have lots of questions and ideas. You heard Basil perhaps talking about changes to showering. What are the alternatives? What can people do?
Well, really, and Basil, I want to say you had to be one of the listeners of the show, because that was very simply and very good Power Smart information, and BC Hydro and salts for 10 years. I talked about that on the air. But in any event, how do you go about it? Really, there's a lot of items that you can do. First and foremost, when you're dealing with a residential home, and a residential home today can be a single detached, it can be a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, it can be apartment, it can be a condominium. All these different types of homes are residences. Now, let's talk about the single detached home, because that's where people have the furnace that they control. And having a furnace that they can control is what is really going to be the major heat source this time of the year. And the evenings, the nighttime temperatures are going down. And going down, what do you do? Keep those drapes, keep your Venetian blinds, keep the door closed into your bedroom. If the door is sweeping very tight to the floor, then you should have someone, or do it yourself, cut those doors off to allow at least air to come out of that room back into the heat resource, because your furnace is a central system. That's what we call a central heating forced air system. And that requires air to come out of register, into a room, and back to the resource, which is preheated and sent back. So most important, keep the temperature at a temperature that you can satisfy by putting on socks, an extra pair of underwear, that type of thing, your pajamas, and extra sheets and quilts on the bed.
And that may mean something different, for Basil in Vancouver versus someone who's up north, where temperatures are at zero or below.
Absolutely. And getting up into the areas of Prince George, which I'm very, very familiar with, that different heating resources are there. And I found it quite interesting with Northern BC, the university being pellets. And pellets, I go back a long ways with pellets, to the point where they were using feed pellet machines to make wood pellets for stoves. And yes, you can use pellet stoves. They've got single units. They've got zero clearance units that go into fireplaces for refits. Those are items, but you think about cooking. Microwave cooking is certainly less, and that's electric. You can go into the ovens, the convection ovens that are plug-in type that you can plug in on a countertop, and that will do your heating for cooking, etc. As far as temperature, radiant heat, central little units, you hear them called cube heaters, you hear them called radiant vertical heaters. Those are all energy-efficient units, normally around 1,300 to 1,500 watts of heat. But they will give you heat. The most important thing is, do not shut or block off areas in your home that are going to be required for such things as combustible furnaces. And that's what a lot of people will do. They'll take the return air that comes from the outside, which is called makeup air, that is combustible air for the furnace. You can't block that off, even though you may be getting a draft from it, but the draft is required for the furnace, so you've got to be very careful with carbon monoxide. So carbon monoxide is something you've got to be concerned about.
Certainly.
So all these items are so important, and you can go, I'm very surprised that we today are not doing more in ground source heat pumps, for example. Geothermal. Geothermal is by far a very efficient, yes, it is electric to the point that it runs the pumps for water in the wells and also in the streams and the ponds, etc. But I'm really surprised that we're not doing more of that in such buildings as universities.
Well, we'll ask more about that perhaps in a couple of minutes. We're going to hear from someone with the Sustainable Energy Association just after 12:30. Shel Busey is my guest, home improvement consultant, a voice familiar to many of our listeners, and we are asking you how this call to reduce our use of natural gas is affecting you. And Chris is on the line, 1-800-825-5950, toll-free. Chris is joining us from Salmon Valley near Prince George. Hi, Chris.
Oh, good evening. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How is this affecting you?
Well, we haven't had any natural gas since Tuesday evening when Hydro came around and shut it off for most of the neighborhood, I guess. And, we're coping pretty well. I mean, it's a good thing we didn't lose electricity.
Incidentally, that would be Fortis that would shut that off.
It would be Fortis, yeah. So this was this would not just be because of the flow, but was it also a safety issue at that time, Chris?
As far as I know, I think it was just because they shut off both pipelines, and I don't know why they went around and shut off the houses at the meter.
So you haven't had natural gas since, and so what have you been doing? You've been using electricity?
Yes, thank goodness we have electricity. Normally a problem out here is electrical failure, but and I've always been patting myself on the back that I've got natural gas fireplaces converted from wood, because that always goes during the power outages, but at least it's not too cold up here yet.
Well,
but, I mean, wearing sweatpants and a sweater in the house, and it's we're getting by. We've got we can boil water for washing and cooking, and that's about it. Apparently, they're supposed to be. The rumor is they're supposed to be coming out today once they get the pipeline back online to turn on our gas at the houses. So, and
for you in Prince George, as you say, someone's going to be coming by today. Have you heard anything more about when residents there might be able to use natural gas at the full capacity, at the usual rate?
No, I haven't heard a thing. I'm hoping it comes on sometime today, because it's been a couple of days without a shower, so it'll be nice.
Chris, thank you very much. It's really good to hear from you, and I'm glad to hear that as you say, you're coping. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Take care. That's Chris calling us from Salmon Valley. And Shel Busey, what would your advice be for people who are in his position right now?
Well, it's interesting that that sort of information is getting out. I heard this morning on the news that it looks as though it may be back on by Monday. So if that's the case, and they do have a bypass in the line now, which is reducing the amount of volume of cubic footage of gases going into the main line. But using and shutting off gas is two things here. Using gas, you can use it respectively, and you can certainly be a little more economy conscious.
Right.
To go and shut off gas at the meter, incidentally, we would not touch gas at the meter unless there's a gas fitter, that's a certified gas fitter, or someone from Fortis BC to do it, because you don't know if the functionality of the stove, for example, or a heater or a pilot or malfunctioning. That's why we really say have your furnace maintained every year, or have your fireplaces maintained every year. So what I would be suggesting people do is look very seriously. We have fans in the summertime to keep ourselves cool. Then there are fans out there now with heaters, with radiant heating type of services that they provide out of the radiant heater, as well as the fan. So buy one of those and put it in the closet and use it when required. And they're safe. That's the thing. And I can't say enough about safety around the home, because you can't be blocking off such things as chimneys, for example, if the chimney is the one that's being used for combustible air coming back into the home. And a hint here for all your homeowners is very important. If you can smell the odors of a chimney. That's a smell of creosote. Then you are using your chimney as a makeup air vent into the home. Now, you block that off, then you're blocking off air that you require as a human to breathe. So therefore, you could have, again, I come back to carbon monoxide, because a lot of people, how many times do you hear that people heating their homes with a barbecue? You know, you can't do a propane gas barbecue in the home. You can't run a generator in the home because they produce carbon monoxide. And those are items, when this sort of thing happens, we as a provincial sources of energy, we should be promoting that to the homeowner and let the homeowner know what critical circumstances that they're up against. And that's what we did do when we were doing radio programs, is educating the public. And believe you me, you've got a wonderful show today. And why do we have to come to this type of situation that all of a sudden, whoa, hold the horn here. We got to get people now to understand why they should be doing this.
What does it tell you about our energy use and our reliance on natural gas when an incident like this can affect as many 700,000 customers around British Columbia?
Not enough backup information in order to have the homeowner in a position that they can go back into a system that they can rely on as a portable system. Now, there's all kinds of, I heard about pellet stoves from the northern BC, from David, I believe his name was.
Yes.
And, there's outdoor furnaces now, that the furnaces is outdoors in the backyard, and the energy is sent into the home, and you can have that with hot water radiant heating or convection heaters on the wall. All those sort of things can be done. But to put a pellet heater into a home, pellets, no matter which way you look at it, is wood. And that wood, when burning, what are we offsetting, or are we going to get people to convert to something that, how often does this situation happen? I mean, how many years has it been that something like this interfered or interrupted natural gas flow?
We have an email from Percy who writes, in the winter, I always keep the heat off and just use an extra blanket here and there. And for the nighttime, I bought an electric heating pad that costs about $25, and I keep that at my feet, which some nights even keeps me too warm. We are talking about alternatives, and now we're joined by Armin Mutahi, who is the Vancouver Operation Director with the BC Sustainable Energy Association. And good afternoon, Armin.
Good afternoon to you as well. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. What would you like to put forward? What practical alternatives are there? We've been talking about some already, but what practical alternatives are there to natural gas when it comes to heating your home and cooking?
Yeah, well, at our chapter, we have been gathering professionals and other stakeholders around and hear their stories, and it's fascinating for me to see that where we are going. I want to start off by saying that Shell did a fantastic job of explaining what we call occupant behavior. I have personally seen that there is studies that showing that occupant behavior is more important than how the homes are designed in some cases. And also mentioning about the geothermal heat pumps as one of the technologies of the future is interesting to see how these systems are going to replace our older systems. However, I should point out that some studies also show that geothermal heat pumps have a little bit of delicacy in replacing the amount of energies that have been harvested from the ground. So in some cases, if there is more energy that has been taken from the ground than it has been put back in there, there could be some issues. So even these new systems can never remedy the overuse of equipment. So it's still occupant behavior. So what people are doing around their homes are going to be an important factor. of not only lowering the cost of their consumption, but also in such situations that we have to be mindful about our usage.
So it's in spite or regardless of what the system is, a lot also relies on what residents do, what people do. So what are some of those things?
It is regardless of what the equipment or the design of the home. You can never remedy. You can never have overuse of equipment by users. Very high temperatures, and expect that you will be using the systems efficiently. And also another subject that has been coming up more is climate change and how it's going to affect the ways that the equipment are being used around the homes. So with the transition to more electricity-powered equipment, such as heat pumps, they can do both heating and cooling at the same time, while with systems like natural gas, we do not have that kind of capacity.
Okay, Armin, thank you so much for taking our call.
Thank you for having me.
That's Armin Mutahi, the Vancouver Operation Director with the BC Sustainable Energy Association. And Shel Busey, just to wrap up with you, we've been talking about how this affects people personally in their everyday lives, but he mentioned climate change there. How much of a factor is that?
Well, climate change, I think we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, a year-to-year basis, and that is that what is changing each year. And right now, as everyone knows, in British Columbia, especially in the lower mainland area, that the temperatures are very, very warm. This came back from the eastern provinces of Nova Scotia, and they had the warmest summer that they have on record for a century. And that sort of thing is going to happen. And really, Armin made a very good point there, and that is that design of homes, when you go into a home that is 5,000 square feet, for example, a huge house, and is being heated by natural gas furnace, then they should have what's called a zoned gas-fired furnace in that home. And you say that to the individual homeowner that's buying a new home, they'll look at you with jaundiced eyes saying, what does that mean? And there's heat recovery systems within the home that should be never shut off. People shut them off. There is such a tremendous change in the environmental temperature across the country to build a house that is sustainable as far as energy. I think we're going to see a lot of more propellers above our home in areas that the propellers will be in a wind zone that they can create power to keep us backed up and sustained within a home with requirements of energy efficiency windows, energy efficiency walls, ceilings, basements, and geothermal, for example. Geothermal, I've done both. I've built houses with the geothermal, and I've remodeled homes, restored homes with geothermal. And one particular installation we had, believe it or not, Michelle, we had, at that time it was BC Gas, came by to see where the load went, because all of a sudden our load went way down in the wintertime, because now we were using geothermal from ground source.
Wow, it is such a good conversation, Shel, and thank you so much for lending us your knowledge of this.
Michelle, I really appreciate it, and thank you. The program is great.
That's Shel Busey, a home improvement consultant, familiar to many listeners here on CBC Radio.